information centralized around him. So it puts a lot of pressure on him. Okay, let's see where we're holding over here.
How was Shabbos, Yosy?
Beautiful.
How's the weather in Lakewood?
It's beautiful here. It's probably about 10 degrees, 10, 15 degrees. Not a cloud in the sky. It's beautiful. Okay, I'm going to visit your Pesi tonight. I have to deliver shulchanos, so I'll send you regards.
Thank you very much.
We have a 9:30 appointment. Okay. Zok the Heilige Gemara. Nafla lagina v'nehenis mishalemes mashenehenis. So you have this animal that was on, let's say, a roof, and it fell off the edge of the roof, and it fell next door, and it plopped on vegetation, fruits and vegetables that were growing below it, which softened its fall. So that's not chayiv al shein. It was an oinus, but it's chayiv to pay mashenehenis. The owner of the animal has to pay what he benefited. So Rav came along and said something very interesting. Amar Rav benechfeta. The only type of damage that we're saying you only pay mashenehenis for, you don't have to pay the full value of the produce damaged, was if the animal crushed it. Avol achla, what if the animal fell there on the ground and then ate it? Afilu mashenehenis einu mishalamis. You won't even pay mashenehenis, which is very difficult to understand why. So the Gemara tries to propose a reason which the Gemara shoots down right away. Now this is a very interesting suggestion, because we had a couple of blot ago that if I bring unauthorized food into somebody else's property, and the owner of the property, his animal, eats my food, and because of that the animal dies, I don't have to pay. Rav holds I don't have to pay for the death of the animal, because I can say your animal shouldn't have eaten from this food. So somehow the Gemara is trying to manipulate that here as well. Rashi says, "Or hakanami," when the Balabema could say it fell down ba'oinus and it should never have eaten. So what do you want me to do? Which is a very hard swara to absorb. But instead of trying to absorb it, let's just go to the next kasha of the Gemara. Frank the Gemara, Amri Hachi Ashta. How could you compare this at all to that case where the owner of the food is potter from damages caused to the animal? There, the owner of the food could say your animal should never have eaten my food. So since your animal should never have eaten my food, I'm not paying for it. I'm not paying for the damage to the animal. But that's heicha the itzagahi. That's when the animal got damaged. The matzi amarle marei de peri, the owner of the parish could say to the owner of the animal, loy mishalamna, I'm not paying for your animal. Hayallah shaloi soicha. Your animal should never eat my food. But lazuka hi achrini, but that's not a reason why if my animal ate your food, that I should be part to pay for the food. Lazuka hi achrini, the petir l'shlumi miyamar. Where in the world do you get from there that if your animal ate someone else's food, he should be potter, or you should be potter? Ella, we're going to have to change what Rav said. And Rav wasn't saying that if the animal ate food rather than crushed food, it would pay nothing. Rather, to the contrary. And let's have a look at the Nun Tesam Aleph, which is today's daf. Loy mi boy kamer. Loy mi boy ochla the mishalemes mashenehenis. It's poshut. If when the animal fell and crushed food, that's maybe a chiddush. But if the animal ate food, without a doubt, the animal will definitely pay mashenehenis. Why not mashe zika? Because again, this was a case of an onion that fell down, even though the animal was properly guarded. But if the animal just banged up and crushed the food, maybe the owner of the animal should be potter in Gansen. Why? Because there's a rule when it comes to saving other people from damage, the rule is in certain cases you're obliged to do so, and you have no right to claim compensation. When my animal's falling off the roof, the owner of the parish might be obliged to save this animal's life free of charge. There's a halacha that if an ari is coming to attack the nechasim of your chaver, and you're in a position to save your friend's nechasim, you have to do so, even at a cost, and you can't claim any cost whatsoever. It's your duty as a good Samaritan. So maybe that principle of Mavriach Hari Menichse Avera should apply here as well.
By the way, that's a New Testament term you're using.
What Mavriach Hari Menichse Avera?
Good Samaritan.
A good Samaritan is a New Testament term.
Parable of the Good Samaritan.
Oh, yeah, I better be careful what I'm saying. I did not know that. I'm not sure if that was an exposure or a reveal, but it wasn't good. I apologize. I did not know that. I know of the good. When I learned first aid, they taught us that if you hurt somebody when you're trying to save somebody, like doing CPR, there's a law called the Good Samaritan's Law that you can't be held liable. So that's where I heard the word Samaritan, but I didn't realize that it comes from the New Testament. Okay. Okay, so you might think I'd be potter in Ganten. Kamash Malon, that you're chayiv. Frek the Gemara, why tak are you chayiv? Maybe it is Mavriach Hari. Beim Hachanami. Mavriach Hari. And for the Gemara, no, there's two conditions that have to be met. Or actually, there's one of two conditions that have to be met to make him potter. Mavriach Hari midai toyu. First of all, you're willingly going to save your friend's animal, your friend from this Ari. Here, I didn't choose that your animal should fall on my produce. It happened, nobody asked me. So that's one reason why there's a chiyuv to pay. And as well is inami mavriach hari less like pseida. But a high is like pseida. By mavriach hari, I'm running after somebody, I'm saving something. It's not costing me any money. Here it's costing me money. And therefore, you don't have the principle of Mavriach Hari. So there's a long Tosfos that discusses Mavriach Hari when yes, but not. I'm just going to throw out some small details. First of all, Tosfos says that these two items listed over here, it doesn't mean if any one Tanai is not there. If it's not Midaitor, or if there's no loss, either one alone makes him chayiv to pay. It doesn't exonerate him because of Mavriach Hari. Tosfos says that's not true. Unless both conditions are present. Unless Sai, it's Midaita. And Sai, it costs you money. There is a halacha of Mavriach Hari, and in fact, you would be potter. Tosfos brings up another point, and he asks the kasha, he brought rides from many Gemaras, that when you do save someone's thing, even if it was midaita, or even if it cost you money, you still don't get paid back. So Tosfos wanted to understand why not. So Tosfos says that Mavriach Hari, that you don't have a right to claim, that's only if it's not 100% sure that there would be damage. If there's 100% sure that damage is going to happen here, that's not called Mavriach Hari. There you have a right to ask for payment. The only reason why you don't have a right to ask for payment by Mavriach Hari is because you're saving something that didn't necessarily have to be saved. In other words, the Ari was coming, it was far away. We're not 100% sure that it was going to attack. There's a chance it was going to attack. You went on your own and you decided that you wanted to save the day. That's where he's potter to pay you. But if there was an animal actually attacking someone else's nechasim, it was an act of attacking, and you saved it, in fact, then you do have a right to ask for payment. Okay. And there's a discussion besides my payment, anything that it costed me, any help that I have to commission. There's a discussion as to if that's included in the payment that's required. Okay, Tosfos at the end gets into something really fascinating, based on historical issues that would happen in those days, where government officials would come and seize people's property, and then a yid would go bail it out. And the question is, does he have to give it to the original owner? Can he charge the owner full price? Does he have to give the owner something because maybe he bought it at a discount? So that unfortunately, in those days, it was not that uncommon for the goyim just to seize property with no rhyme or reason. And there was a discussion as to how that could be retrieved, and if someone bailed it out, what his rights would be. Okay, let's see the Gemara about it. Nofa. Heichi dami, heichi nofa. We have an animal that fell onto someone's produce. Exactly what occurred? How did it fall? In other words, we're saying it was an oinus. It was an oinus that makes the owner not responsible. What type of nefila shel oinus would have caused that this owner is not responsible to pay mashazika, rather only mash in the hands? Of Kahan Amar shahochulka b'mei merakla. It got wet and it got slippery and it slipped. That's a reason why you only pay mash in the hands. Rava Amar shadachvasa chaverta. It's not such a big oinus. Hukla b'mei is a very big oinus. Chaverta means I had two animals up there together. I somewhat missed out something that I should have been careful about, not let two animals walk together. But still, how am I supposed to know that one animal might push the other animal over the edge? It's that only that says you pay mashanets. If you hold that the chvaza chaverta only pays mashanehenes and not mashazika, because we consider that an oinus, surely it would be considered an oinus if the animal slipped on its meragline. But a mandama which is a bigger oinus, because there's nothing anybody could have done to prevent that, they would hold avodah chvaza chaverta pasha. It would be a pshia mushalamish mashazika, and it would pay like regular shein. Why is it a pshia? Because the nizik can tell the mazik to amalei iboy lechavure echad echad. You should never have had two animals rocking along the edge of the roof. You should have had them walking one at a time, and then you would have been able to avoid this potential problem. Amar Khan, loy shanu elava oisar. That we say you only have to pay mach and hennis, that's only on that aruga. The road that it actually fell on, you pay mach and hennis. Avo me aruga la aruga. But what if this animal got up and went to another aruga and ate from it? There mishalem is mashazika. Then you're already paying mashazika. That's no longer covered by the umbrella of the oinus of this incident. Rabbi Yochanan Amar afilu me aruga aruga afilu cholim kula. It's like a full day pass. Once the animal fell in during that particular event, whatever it does there, the chiyuv to pay will only be mash in the hands. Until the animal leaves the property of that victim, and this event is over, and the owner willingly brings it back in. Omer Papa, that doesn't make sense. Don't say it means that you're not chayiv unless you forcibly bring your animal in. No. Once the owner of the animal is aware of what occurred and knows that the animal's out, it's incumbent on the owner of the animal to make sure that this animal never goes into that chutzner. Even though his animal went in without him knowing about it, he'll still be chayiv to pay all of the damages. Aitin oinis? No. My timer, the Amerle, even the Yofa, once this animal already knows that there's food for it in that garden, the owner's got to be aware that if he's ever going to let the animal out of his sight, he has to assume it's running to that property. So anytime he doesn't see his animal, he's got to dash straight to that property, because the assumption is that the animal will go right back there, and therefore you're chayiv for any damages that your animal does, even if it left your property machmas oinus, you know where it went, and it's incumbent on you as the owner to get it quickly before it damages your friend's field. Okay. Yarda kedarka vizika mishalemes mashazika. An animal went normally into somebody else's field and committed shein regel. The owner of the animal has to pay him for it. Boy, Rabbi Yirmiyah. What would happen if Yarda kedarka, the animal walked in somebody else's field but didn't eat anything? Vizika b'meileda. The animal suddenly gave birth, and whatever came out of it fell on the fruits that were there, and naturally these fruits are no longer usable. Mao, what is Allah? If you hold that if something starts off with a pshia Like in this case, it was a pshia that your animal got into somebody else's property. The actual occurrence was an oinus. There's no way you could predict when the animal's going to break its water. There, loiti boilach, for sure you're going to be chai. He's a boilach, alimida mandamar, chilosav pshia, v'sayf banyas potter. So maybe over here you should be chayiv anyway. My miarmino kivan the tchilas of pshia v'soif one is potter. So the owner here is potter. Idilma hacha kula pshi. We don't consider the fact that the animal soiled the pears as an inus. Kivan the kachazi the kravel alamelad. The owner of the animal must have known that it's near full term and should have known that this could happen at any time. It would have been incumbent on the owner of this animal to keep a close watch on this animal, turning over on Tamid Beis, ula tamure bigava, and to watch it carefully that it shouldn't do any such damage, and therefore the Gemara ranges of a teku whether or not the owner of this animal will be chayav to pay for the damages to the payers due to them being soiled by the animal's melee. Okay, now we're going to get into a whole new sugya. Ketat mishalemes mashezi. In order to learn this sugya well, I think we should go back to the Mishnah. I think the Mishnah is on Nun Vav Amud Beis, if I'm not wrong. The first Mishnah Kohenis. Can someone tell me where it is if you have a real Gemara, so I don't have to fish through the blätter over here? Is it Nun Vav Amud Beis?
No, it's not.
Nun Zayin? Or is it Nun Hamad Beis? The first Daf of a Kohenis.
No.
Not more than 3 blot ago. It's not
The
Nun
beginning of the pair.
Nun Hay. It's a Nun Hamad Beis.
In the art scroll, I had to flip like 15 pages.
So Nun Hamad Beis. So if we go towards the end of the Mishnah, the end of the Mishnah asks, Ketzad mishalemes masha hezik. How does an animal pay damages? It ate some fruit in someone's field. How are the damages assessed? Zok the Mishnah, Shaman Beisa Sada. You assess the value of a Beisa in this field. Kama Hoysa Yafa, how much it was worth for Kama Hiyafa. Rashi learns, let's see Rashi. Ain Shaman Esaruga Lavad. You don't just go look at the value of the fruit in this row. That's going to end up costing way too much, and the mazik is going to lose more than he really should. Because you're going to end up assessing the full value of the fruit as standalone fruit. For Achman Amar, but the pasuk says not like that. The pasuk is ubir b'steyacher. B'dashinim b'gemara, we're going to learn today. Al gaf sodacheres. When you evaluate it based on its presence or its absence and how it impacts the value of the field that it's in, not by the actual value of the fruit. Therefore, Zok Rashi, Elashaman Beisa ba'oisasada. You assess the value of a full Beisa in that field. Kama hoisa yafa kodim shenechla mimenu aruga. Before this aruga was eaten, the chama yafa actual, and how much it's worth now that this aruga, this row is no longer there. Now he's not going to be paying the full value of these fruits as if he would buy them in the supermarket. The mishalakech beisa keshehibit fuasa. If you buy a full beisa, the difference in how much you're willing to pay, whether or not one row in this large field is missing or not, he's only going to reduce the value of the property by a little bit. So therefore, the mazik can tell the nizik, I didn't damage you the full value of the fruit. If you look at how much I made your land worth less, that's what I'm going to pay you. And that's what the chiv is to pay, because the pasuk tells us, don't look at the actual fruit that were damaged, look at how much the mazik devalued your field. So Rashi reads quite a bit into the words of the Mishnah. Rashi says it means you make this assessment. Tosfos does not like Rashi's pshat. One of the ha'aris he has on Rashi's pshat is a beisa. A beisa is a male tense. So why does the Mishnah say Shaman Beisa Ba'oisa Sada Kama Hoisa Yafa, the Kama Hi Yafa, Hoisa Yafa and Hi Yafa is female tense. So that's one of the ha'aras Tosfos doesn't like with Rashi's pshat. But we'll learn Rashi, and then maybe if you have time, we'll look at Tosfos a little bit as well. That was the Tanakama Shita. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Achla Peiros Gemurim. If the animal ate fully ripened pears, Mishalemes Peiros Gemurim, and saw, So Rabbi Shimon doesn't seem to be arguing on the Tanakama. He's just saying the Tanakama's halacha applies while the fruits are partially grown, mostly grown. But if they're completely ripened and ready to be harvested, then we don't look at them agab the field. We look at them as if they're already harvested, and you have to pay the value of the pears. Okay. Now we can go back to Daf Nun Ches on the base, our Daf, and hopefully we'll get an understanding of.
Yosy,
Yes.
when you buy fruit, you buy the fruit, and you buy the labor. You're paying also for the labor that costs you to take the fruit off the vines.
So you're asking, why should I pay for food in a supermarket? It doesn't have that labor.
No. You're paying in the supermarket because it has the labor.
Right. So here in the field, why should the
Buy
mazik
it
pay
in
for
the
that?
field, it's cheaper.
So in the Chanami, it's probably the cost of the pears as if you buy in the field. Like when you used to go to Bilyurt, there would be these farmers and they would set up these little butkala along the road, corn for sale, vegetables for sale. So it's that price, not Sobe's price. So it doesn't include all the labor and shipping.
You know,
If
you pick it yourself, it's more expensive.
Then
No, that's
They
because you're
charge you
paying
more for the you pick.
No, you're paying over there for the enjoyment.
entertainment, yeah.
You're paying over there for all of the stuff that people eat and they never check out while they're picking.
Well, Southern Charbadisha, when you're doing it,
That's if you're employed by them, not if you're picking it for yourself.
Okay, Gavaldi. David, you were saying something.
I just wanted to explain what was being said by Beryl. No, he said you didn't seem to understand what he was saying. You have to subtract the labor value from the fruit. So it's not like in Sobeys.
So when I said what it would cost in Sobeys, that's not accurate because there's a lot more costs racked up till it gets to Sobeys. And you could see the Gemara is being very political because the Gemara is referring to the carbon tax for the fuel for the truckers to transport it to the supermarket.
All of that.
Okay. Zak the Heilige Gemara. So take Kesad Mishalemes Masha Zika. Let's get into the Gemara. How do you know that it works? Agav the Kaka, as Rashi already pointed out, that's the Mishnah. Amar Amasna the Amar Kro Ubir B'Steyacher Malamid Sheshamin Al Gav Steyacher. Frank the Gemara, that's not what we use Ubir B'Steyacher for. We know Ubir B'Steyacher is what taught us that you're only chai for Shein and Regel B'Shus Anizik. You're not chai for B'Shus Rabbim like you are for Karen. Zok to Gemara, we actually can learn two things out of Ubir B'Steyacher. Because if it just wanted to tell us that your partner from Shein and Regel B'Shus Rabbim and Kein Lichter Rachman Ubir B'Stei Chavera Inami Steyacher my B'Steyacher, it teaches you Sheshamin Al Gav Steyacher. B'Steyacher, when you assess the damage, it's B'Steyacher that you assess the damage. Frank Gemara Be'ema Kulei Lahaki Huda also. Maybe the Bir B'Steyacher is only telling you this new halacha that when you assess the damages, you assess the damages based on the valued field. Maybe we don't have any car that you're potter from Shein and Regel and Rishus Rabbim. Zok Gemara, that's not true either. Because in Cain, if the only discussion is how you assess the payment, then where should the Torah have told us B'Steyacher? Cain lichted their Chemana Gabet Hashlumin. The Torah should have said B'Steyacher when the Torah was discussing the payment for the damages, which is where it says Meitav Sadeu Meitav Karma Yishalim. There it should have said B'Steyacher. Lamali the customer Chemana Gabe Ubir. Why was the Torah talking about B'Steyacher rules of how the payment is made when the Torah is just discussing how the damage occurred? Shemami Notarta, you see from the placement of the halacha about how you pay, the fact that it's placed when we're talking about the damages, we see another halacha that the Torah teaches us that you're only chayiv for shein v'regel b'shusan. Now, Rashi comes up with a bombshell chiddush that's not mentioned anywhere in the Gemara, or the Mishnah, or the Torah. And Tosfos, I only spoke out one kasha that Tosfos had on Rashi's pshat, and that was why it uses a lashon nekeva when it's talking about a beis saw. But Tosfos is going to have a much bigger problem with Rashi's pshat because of Rashi's innovative pshat that he just said. And let's have a look. It says saw b'samach saw. What does it say over here? Let's go one line weiter. Hechli shaminon amar Yosy bar Chanina saw b'shishim sawin, one saw and 60 saw. What does that mean? The Mishnah said, you see how much a saw was worth with this row, without the row. Now we have a new thing of saw b'shishim sawin. What does that mean? Rabbi Yamei Amar tarkav b'shishim tarkavim, which is a half of a saw, which is in 30 saw. Chizki Amar, which seems to be the same ratio. And Chizki Amar klach b'shishim klachim, one head of lettuce, I guess, in 60 heads of lettuce. But whatever the case is, it's 1 to 60, not focusing on the property, focusing on the goods. So let's see what this means. Saw b'samach son. Let's look at Rashi. Hi beisa de katani b'mesnisim, the b'shvil aruga achas shaman beisa. So Pashim Shad is you take the value of one beisa, let's say it's worth $100,000, and with that row it's worth $100,000. Without that row, let's say it's worth $98,000. So the damages will be $2,000. But that's not what this means, Rashi. Lav beisa b'apinafshe shamina. You don't just assess one beisa on its own. You know why? Because that's going to be way too expensive. The mekrishin leila mazik. This is going to cost a mazik a lot more. If you just want to buy a small piece of property like a beisa, that's very, very expensive to buy. Why is it very expensive to buy? If you bought a small piece of property, it's you don't usually people who buy land buy in large quantities. So if you have a poor person who can't afford a big piece of property and he's looking for a small piece of property, it's like the difference in shopping in Costco or shopping at a variety store. You're paying a lot of money because you're buying in much smaller amounts. So you might be paying $1,000 an acre if you're buying 1,000 acres. But if you're buying 1 acre, you might pay $5,000 for that acre. And therefore, the karachas arugo shokave kavayim choshev lefidamov will be very, very expensive based on if you're looking at a very expensive saw. If you're paying $5,000 for the saw, when if you bought 60 saw, you'd only pay $1,000 per saw. Now that row in a $5,000 saw is going to be much, much more expensive. And that's not what we want the mazik to pay. Zok Rashi, you know what it means? Saw b'samach soim? El shamin shishim soim kama shavim. When we want to identify how much a saw costs, you don't look at it like you're buying a saw that's sawn. You look at how much a saw costs as part of a parcel of land that is 60 saw. There a saw is only worth $1,000. El shamin shishim soim kama shavim. How much they're worth? V'royin kama dama magil beisa. So there, when you're buying a lot of property, then the beisa maybe would only cost $1,000. Based on the saw worth $1,000, then you see what it gets devalued if it's missing a row. The chayzin v'shamin kama nifas chudamav v'shil karachas arugazu. So, Frek Rashi, why do this so complicated? Just say you have a big field at 60 saw and assess it how much is worth with the row or without the row. Zok Rashi, that wouldn't work either. Why is the shear of a saw relevant to us? We're not talking about a big property of 60 saw. If you would follow what I just said, where you just see what would the devaluation of the field be because of one row from a huge field at 60 saw, the damage would be virtually nothing. one small row in a huge field of 60 saw, the person buying it would probably pay the same price whether or not it had that row, was missing that row. It's too irrelevant in the scope of such a big field. But based on the carrots, so we do a hybrid. We get the value of a saw based on if it was part of that big parcel. But then we look at how it would be devalued if it was missing a row. A little bit of a complicated cheshbon. Tosfos asks, where do you see this in the Gemara that there's a dual cheshbon? You don't see it anywhere. That's one of Tosfos' arguments on Rashi. And Tosfos has a different shot, but I don't want to overcomplicate it, so we will go weiter. So Zok to Gemara, I'm sorry. So that was saw, B'shishim saw. What is Taka B'shishim Tarkavan? What is the argument made by Rabbi Yanai? How is he differing from Rabbi Yosy bar Chanina? So Rashi, it's Shloshim Shomim, V'lo Shishim. So right off the bat, it's very obvious what the difference is. You're paying more per saw if you're only buying 30 saw versus 60 saw. If you're going to base it on the value of a saw as part of a large parcel of 60 saw, it's going to be very valueless. But Rashi gives us some very interesting perspectives on when you're sizing the parcel of land, you got to hit a sweet spot. Too big is no good, you won't find buyers for, and too small, you won't find buyers for. So let's look at Rashi, how Rabbi Yanai was very in tune to the nuances of the real estate market, and he understood what's marketable and what's not. So let's see what he says over here. If you want to base it on 60 saw, the nizik is going to lose. You know why? You know what? There's very few people who have a type of money that want to buy such a massive, massive piece of property. It's way too much money for a average person. And for a multi-millionaire, 60 saw is too little. So therefore, there's very little demand for a property that's 60 saw. So it's going to be worth so little because nobody wants such a piece of property that the nizik's not going to get anything out of it. But 30 saw is something that there is demand for, but it's still affordable, and that's why we're using 30 saw. The third shita says don't look at land at all. Chizkiah says all you do is he damaged an apple. See how much it would cost if you buy in bulk 60 apples, and he'll pay 1/60th of that. No matter what it is, it's always 1/60. Zok to Gemara, Meisvei. Achla kavai kavai. What if your animal ate a calf or two calves? Ein noimrim tisham demeyen. You don't say that you should just pay the value of the fruit that he ate, just like our Mishnah said. But elaroyin oisa ki ilu hi aruga ktana. You look at it like it's a small row, umeshar noisa, and you value the row growing in the field. Don't look at it like it's ready to be bought on the shelf. Just look at the row as it grows. My love of the this seems to say that you don't measure 1 out of 60. This seems that you just value the row. So this is Shver Zok Rashi on all three shitas that we just quoted. It's Shver on Rabbi Yosy bar Chanina, it's Shver on Rabbi Yanai, and it's Shver on Chizkiah. Because they also, you have to have 1 out of 60. You have to look at it as part of a greater bulk package. Yet this brisa seems to say that you look at it individually. Don't read into the brisa. Say the brisa means b'shishim. This is another point that Tosfos doesn't like with Rashi, because this is not a kasha on these three Tanoim as to how they're explaining the Mishnah. This is a kasha on the Mishnah itself. According to the Rashi, pshat of the Mishnah itself was you look at aruga in a field. So this brisa is a shver on the Mishnah. Why is the Gemara asking this kasha on our three people who are being mefarish the Mishnah, Rabbi Yosy bar Chanina, Rabbi Yanai, and Chizkiah? This is a steer directly to our Mishnah. So because of that, Tosfos didn't learn like Rashi. There's a long Rashi in the Mishnah that talks about how you look at a row amongst many rows. Tosfos says that's much, much too complicated. All the Mishnah said is, someone saw by saw, that means if you ate a saw, you got to pay the value of the saw. But the Mishnah never got into any details as to how that payment was going to be. That's all focused here in the Gemara. And therefore, Tosfos rejects the double layering of you look at a big field and you take a saw from big field. Tosfos disagrees with all that. But it's for these difficulties that Tosfos has with Rashi that he embarks on his own shot. So although I'm not going to go through Tosfos thoroughly, at least we know the different issues that Tosfos had with Rashi's shot. Tanu Rabbanan, Ein Sham and Kaf, Mipnei Shem Hashpich. You don't only look at one Kaf because that's going to be good, too good for one of them. V'loy be'eskur mipnei shepoig might be bad. My Kamer, what does this mean? Amar Papa Hachi Kamer. Ein Sham and Kaf v'shishim Kavim, Mipnei Shem Hashpich Mazik. Don't look at a kav in 60 kav because that's going to help the mazik. It's not going to be worth much. As Rashi says, imach lakav ain't shavim b'shishim kavin. You don't look at the value of a kav in 60 kavin. Mipnei shemishpich mazik. So Rashi, the shishim kavin ain't lo hamecher. Once again, we're analyzing consumer habits. People don't buy the quantity, the bulk quantity of 60 kav. Why? Mipnei shemerub mehem la'ani. They're too expensive for an oni to buy, but a regular person wouldn't buy such a small amount. It's like a 6-pack of beer. You either buy a 2-4 or you buy a single. You don't buy a 6. So it's like it's neither here nor there. I don't know if that's an accurate analogy because I don't know people's buying habits in beer, but it's exactly that issue. And part of what marketers do is they analyze how many can you bulk together that people will buy, right? If water bottles generally come in trays of 24. I guess someone did research. If you sell them in trays of 40, people won't buy it. 24 was a sweet spot. So our Gemara is doing the same thing. Now our Gemara is telling us that people will not buy shishim kav. And therefore, and the oich and karachas kav nikers b'shishim kav. It's also hard to see, so it doesn't look like a big loss. So it's going to end up being a very small payment, and then this is going to lose out. On the other hand, we're like Kur b'shishim kurim, the Fetchapayamas. Kur is way bigger than the Kav, way bigger, but that's going to cost even more. Someone who's very wealthy, and wants to buy a big piece of property, that 60 saw is precisely what he wants. That's exactly the target size that he's looking for. He's willing to pay more per acre for a property with 60 saw, 60 core. He's willing to pay more per acre when he's going to buy a property of 60 core than he would be willing to pay for a property of 40 core. So normally, the bigger it is, the less you pay per acre. But sometimes there's such a sweet size, it's perfect for his farm, he'll be willing to pay more per acre for it. And therefore, I'm sorry, I was going back. Plus, if you look at one core missing, even though it's a huge field of 60 core, but a core is such a big area, you could see it from Google Earth. You'll be able to see what a big patch is missing. Right? Sometimes you see on Google Earth, people cut out messages in their fields, like truck Trudeau, but instead of the TR, they shorten it with the F. Or there's different messages that sometimes people like to put in the air, so people flying over it or looking on Google Earth can see them. So you could see such a big thing lost. So therefore, it'll end up costing the mazik too much. So therefore, you cannot use any of these methods. Rather, it's a saw and 60 saw. So not a kav and 60 kav, it's too small. Not a core and shishim core, it's too big. But it's a saw and 60 saw. Maskav lo Rafuna bar Menoich. Rafuna bar Menoich had a kasha. If you look at the last brisa, Tanu Rabban ein shaman kav mepnei shebeshpichoi, it should say v'loy core mepnei shepogma. Both of them is base. So that is the kasha that the Gemara is going to ask. Frank the Gemara. I'm sorry, I'm skipping. Maskav lo Rafuna bar Menoich. Hi v'loy beiskur v'loy kur mi boile. Amar Rafuna bar Menoich b'shmei Ravacha b'rei Ravika hachi katani. Ein shom kav b'fnei atzmai, mipnei shemashbiach nizik. V'loy kav b'beis kur, mipnei shepoigim nizik. Ela b'shishim. So it's a kav in the base core, not a, so we're talking about when we're talking about the area that it's in, it makes sense to say base. When we're talking about what was damaged, it doesn't make sense to say base. So he amends the briser, he amends the memra that it should say the kav in the base core, which would make sense. And now we have an interesting story. Who gavra the cuts kaspa mechavre. His friend had a palm tree. It was a Persian palm, and he went and chopped it down. That's a lot of damage. Also, made the Reish Galusa. So the Nizik dragged him to the Reish Galusa. Amarle, the Reish Galusa said, I know that tree you cut down. I know exactly which one you're talking about. There were three trunks, three palm trees grew out of one trunk, out of one stump. And all three of them together were very valuable. They're worth 100 zuz. You chopped off one of the three, pay him a third. Zilhavle Talson, the Tulsa of a Tulsa, 33 and a third. Omar, so the Mazik, the Hugaber, the Mazik said, what? Omar Gaviresh Galusa, the Don Dini the Parsa Lemali. Why would I listen to a Reish Galusa that does Persian law? In other words, corrupted law. You're not paskening properly because we've learned until now that you assess it not by its own value. You look at it as one amongst 60. So he is protesting this very high evaluation that the Reish Galusa made. Also, look at Rab Nachman. He told him, forget it, I'm going to go to Rab Nachman. Amal B'Shishim. Rab Nachman told him exactly what he wanted to hear. You'll pay the value based on looking at 60 trees, you'll pay 160, which would be considerably less than the Reish Galusa assessed you at. Amalei Rava, he told him, Nachman, I don't understand. In Marmar B'Nishkim, you know where they said this kula, that you want to protect the nazik. So you look at it, Echad Mishishim, that's when your animal did damage. So you were negligent, but you were not a mazik. Over here, this guy, who Gabra, went and chopped down someone's tree. He's a vandalized. He's a vandal. So he deserves to pay more. He shouldn't be entitled to that kula. What's that?
No.
What?
If you knock down a stone wall, it's a trouble on damages.
Are they talking to us?
Why? It's not about me.
No, it's just Finkel.
You whatever you have.
You know what's happening? Yeah. Akiva is tuned in to here, and he's tuned into Finkel. Okay. So
he's learning in the daf twice.
That's right. No, he's learning five blot ago together with today's blot. Okay. So Zok the Gemara, Amar Baila Rava, where did you get this from to make a distinction between evaluation of Adam Hamazik versus Mamoina Hamazik? Beniske Gufay Madaita. Why do you think that by Niske Gufay it shouldn't be Echad B'Shishim? The Tanya, because we have a brayso that doesn't mention anything about Shishim. It says Amavkir Karma Shalchaverai, which Rashi says you shiches mechila, you destroyed the kerem of your friend. Smadar, if it was somewhat developed, you see how much the kerem was worth before the damages and after the damages. It doesn't mention anything about Shishim. So is this Rava where you get this from, that there should be a distinction and there should be a more of a chomer by Adam Hamazik? That's your raya. It's not a raya, because by Behema I'll show you it uses the same nusach, and we know by Behema that of course it means b'shishim. It just doesn't say it in the brayso. So you can't bring me right from this nusach that it means not b'shishim, because by Behema the brayso uses the same nusach. We have exactly the same type of nusach by Behema. The Tanya Katma Natira. What if your animal totally destroyed a plant of someone else? Rabbi Yosy Omer, Goizrei Gzeres of Yerushalayim Omer, those who used to make Gzeres in Yerushalayim. And Rashi reminds us that when we learned Ksubis, there's a parak all about Gzeres that were made by Hanan ben Avshalom and by Admon. And the Mishnah goes through the Gzeres that they made. So these Goizrei Gzeres, Omer, what are they paskin? So if they damaged one plant that was within the year, Shtei Kesef, that's the damages. Bashtei Shanim, Arba Kesef. What about Achla Chazitz? What if the animal ate like hay? You know what you pay? You pay based on whatever, we're talking about very, very small grown stuff, barely sprouted through the ground. How much do you pay if it eats it up? You know what you do? What you do is you look at whatever he didn't eat, the neighboring small growth. You see what that grew up to be, and that's what the mazik has to pay. So he has to pay for all of the potential that he messed up. You just look at right now the difference in the value of the property with those small little growths and without those small little growths, and that's what's paid. Let's just turn on to Amud Aleph just to finish the subject.
Yosy, sorry, we've got to use this room for 10 minutes. You want to take a break and come back?
I'm going to be finished.
Or you want to go to 7? Or you can go to 7613.
No, I'm going to be finished in 1 second.
Okay, no problem.
You look at it, there's ready grapes. When do you look at what it was worth before and after when it ate very, very premature stuff? If it ate more developed grapes, like Boiser, Roy Noison, Kilu, Anovim, I'm basically Botzer. Whatever the case is, Katani Mios, Roy Noison, Kama Hoisa Yafa, Bakama Yafa, Veloy Katani Beshishim. It doesn't say Beshishim, and this is talking about an animal. You're going to say that even though the Bryce doesn't say Beshishim, it means Beshishim. Hachanami Beshishim. So too, Zok Abaye, this by Adam Mazik might be Shishim as well, and there's strong grounds for this Ahu Gavra to argue on the Reish Kalusa and to say you should only pay 1/60. Okay, we can stop now, and Be'ez Hashem, we will finish tomorrow. We will continue tomorrow at 7 and at 9. So at 7, we're going to learn on 7613, which is channel A, and on 9, at 9, we're going to learn on this channel. Kishkoyach, everybody, have a good tava.
Guaranteed that the 1948 flight will leave on time tomorrow at 9 a.m.
Me.
Ready to go?
Give it 1 more minute if you can. 1 more minute. No.
I
Okay, Kapitel Chov. Kapitel Chov 20. Lamnatzach Mizmor LeDavid. Yam Chadin Levi Yom Tzoros HaGev Choshem Elohe Yaakov. Yishlach Ezecha Mikodesh Mitzion Yisodeko. Yizkako V'Choysecha V'Elosecha Yidash Neselo. Yiten L'Chochavo V'Echa V'Cholatzoscha Yimalei. Nirana V'Shua Secha V'Shem Eloheinu Nidgol Yimalei Adonai Kol Mishalo Yisecho. Atu Yodati Yosy Adonai Mashiach Yanemush Ve'Kodshoy B'Gvuros Yeisha Yeminoi. Eila Berach Vel Basusi V'Nachnu B'Shem Adonai Eloheinu Nazkir. Hey Makor B'Nafol V'Nachnu Kamnu V'Nisoido. Adonai Yosy Melech Yaneinu V'Yoim Kareinu. Kapitel Lamed 30. Mizmor Shir Chanukas Habayis LeDavid. Ay Mimcha Adonai Gidel Lisoni V'Lo Yisimachto Oyevayli. Adonai Eloi Shivati Elecha V'Tipoini. Adonai Eliso Mishoel Nafshi Chisani V'Yordi Boi. Zamiru Ladinoi Chasido Voidu Zeiche Kodshoy. Ki Ega Be'apoi Chaim B'Tzoyne Be'erev Yolam Be'echi V'Laboi Kerino. Ani Amarti V'Shalvi Ba'lemot Li'oilo. Adonai B'Tzoyn Choy Amad Tolariyo Yiztarto Bonecho Yisinivo. Elech Adonai Ekrov El Adonai Eschano. Ma'betza B'Dom V'Ridit Yoshochas HaYoidecho Foy HaYagid Amitecho. Shema Adonai B'Choneini Adonai Yeyozeli. Ovachto Misbedin L'Mochoyli B'Dachto Saki V'Tazeni Simcho. Man Yizamecha Chavoy V'Lo Yidoy Adonai Eloyai Eloy Lo Moideko. Kapitel Ayin Tes 79. Mizmor Le'osav Eliboy Ugoyim V'Nachal Osecho Timor Sechal Kodshecho Som Esir Sholayim Li'im. Nosnu Eslim L'Asavadecho Ma'acholoi V'Shamayim B'Sar Chasidecho L'Chai Soyores. Shav Chudamon Kamayim Svivois Yerushalayim Ein Koyver. Inu Cherpol L'Shcheneinu Lag V'Keles L'Svivoiseinu. Admodi Noi Tenaf L'Netzach Tivak Moyesh Kinosecho. Shvoy Chamoscho El HaGoyim Asher Lo Yiducho V'Al Mamlochos Hashem Shemcho Lo Yikaro. Yochales Yaakov Estoveu Eishamu. Al Tizkolon Avinus Yishoyne Ma'er Kadmun Rachamecho Gidaloinu Meyoyim. Ozeinu Leishin Advak V'Shemecho V'Atzleinu V'Chaper Chadeseinu L'man Shemecho. Mama Yemu Agoyim Ayeyu Le'Yem Yivoda Agoyim Le'Neinu Nikmas Dam Avodecho Ashofu. Havoy Levonecho In Kasosi Ki Goydu Zoyacho Yiseh B'nei Smuso. Moshe L'Shcheneinu Shvosayim El Cheikom Cheposom Asher Chefucho Adonai. אנחנו עמוכו בצויים היסכו, לא ילכו לא נדוי ודוי נספד אילוסכו. Hey Gimel 83, Shim is my loss of. ולהים על דומי לך תחרש ואל תשקויתן. הנה יבך וימוין ושנאך נוסרוש. על עמך ירימו סויד ויסועצו על צפונך. אמרו לכון מלאך חידה מגוי ולא יזוך השם ישראלוי. כי נו יצאו לב יחדו ולכו בריס יכרויסו. אהלו ידע משמעילה מויו והגרים. ואו במוי ממולק ולשס ויושבי צוער. כמה שורניל באימא מויו זוהר לבני לא יצלו. הסלם כמדריון כסיסו כי אבים מנחל קישוי. נשמדו בין דויר, אוי דוי מן לא אדמו. שיסי מוי נדיבי מוי כאוירי וחזאי וחוזה וחצמונה כל נסיכי מוי. אשר אמרו ניר שלונו איס נויס אלוהים. אלוהי שיסי מוי כגלגל כקש לפני רוח. אשתי ויוח לאהובות להיתרים. היי תדבי מסערך ובסופוס חוסף עליהם. מלא פנים קולים מבקשו שמחו אדוני. יבושו ויבועלו עד היד ויחפרו ויאויבדו. ידעו כי אתה שמך דינוי לבדך עליון על כל אורץ. ביטל קוף א' 121 שילה מלוי ססו עיני אלוהים היין יבוא יזי. עזים עם אדינו יויסי שמיים ואורץ. אל ייתן למות עגלך ינום שוימרך. הנה לא ינום לא ישון שוימי ישראל. אדינוי שוימרך אדינוי צילך היד ימינך. גם השמש לא יקקו וירח בעלוי. אדוני ישמורך מקורו ישמור את נפשך. אדוני ישמוצך ויך ויתו יד אלוהים. קוף למד 130 שיר המלויס ממעמקים כוסיך אדוני. אדוני שמו וקולי תהיינו לך קשובויס לכל תחנונו. אם אבוינו ישתשמעו אדוני מימו. כי עמך הסליחה למען תבורך. כיסי אדוני כיבסו נפשי ולדברו יכולתי. נפשי לאדוני משומרים לבויקר שומרים לבויקר. יחל ישראל על אדוני כי מאדוני החסד והרבה עמו יפדו. הוא יפדס ישראל לכל אבוינו ישראל. קוף בן בייס 142 משכיל לדוד ויוסי באמרו ספילו. קויל אדוני יזו קויל אדוני יזחנו. אשפך לפונו פסיכי צרסי לפונו ויין. יסעתי בלי רוחי ועתידת סיבוסי ויחזו הלך תומנו פחלי. הבית יומי נראה ואיני מכיר עבד מנויס ממני אין דורש לנפשי. זועקתי אליך אדוני אמרתי אתה מחסי חלקי ברצח חיים. Akshiva rinosi da loisi miroi. That's leni miroi tvai come to me, man. Oitzia be maskena shi lo yoz shme kho biatir tzadikim gisik mo lo. Achaynu kobeis son sun batzol ba shivyo. Oyn be yom ben yavo shavakol yachim alayim tzom yitzim tzom ba khamay ba shivyo. Ash tabagol ban kalim no imarom.
Put this back. I gotta take my kid. When? Today? We went to Mosh Blaustein.
Oh, you went to Mosh?
Yeah. And then I stopped. Yeah, I went to Mosh Blaustein. You know.
Is there Friday night?
Yeah, but then he's